Welcome back. It is great to welcome you to Elite Business Live, here live from London's Kensington. I'm Oli Barrett, and we just had a fantastic keynote. We're going to keep on this theme of commercial growth, and it's very exciting to see people in person. It's lovely to see everybody. Welcome, one and all. Let me introduce our first panel, and I know that some of them are here, and hopefully we'll be joined by one of them down the line as well. Let's go. Well, we've met peers already, of course, so it's great to see you. Now, Marko, let me get your surname right for once in my life. Ilnicic.
Close, but not quite. Ilnicic.
Ilnicic. Right. Well, you're the group chairman of Vistage, which in my mind is all about peer-to-peer connection, really. You're in the business of getting people, presumably virtually, learning from each other. Just give us a bit more of a flavour.
Yeah, that's right. Effectively, Vistage is the largest CEO advisory group in the world, and I run a group of 15 CEOs, MDs, and it's a collective opportunity to learn from each other. It's like having a board that you could never possibly commercially afford, because you can ask all these people with this vast experience for initiatives and ideas and support.
Brilliant. Well, I want more on that and about your background as well, which I know involves a rather well-known children's brand or family brand around the world. We'll come back to that. Nick Dormon, welcome. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Managing Director of Echo, which an engineer by background, I noticed, sir.
Originally, yes, but that's a long time ago.
Back in the day. And of course, Echo, brand innovation and design. Give us a sense of the sort of thing you might be working on.
We work with a lot of consumer brands. We work with big companies like Unilever, Nestle, Danone, developing their brands and their packaging and their product, a lot of innovation work, but also with startups, helping them develop a brand and communication.
It's probably quite nice to have that range.
It's fantastic, yeah. I mean, they all feed on each other, really.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Well, lots of questions for you. Saasha, Celestial One, certainly the best name on the panel, I must say.
I would agree.
And you're the co-founder of OLIO, which I'm a huge fan of. It's a now, I mean, I think it's approaching a household name. It's about food sharing.
It is. Yeah, we connect neighbors with each other and volunteers with food businesses to share edible surplus food so nothing goes to waste.
Right, and this is a big problem worth solving because, of course, a lot of food, frankly, does go to waste. Just give us a sense of the numbers and why it's worth doing.
Well, a third of all food goes to waste, and the food supply chain accounts for 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah. So that means that food waste is just under 10%, and it's a really big contributor to the climate crisis. So something that we really need to solve.
And you've got OLIOers, as I think you call them, almost 2.5 million of them.
3.3 now.
Is it?
Yep.
There you go. You've got to check them. This is the challenge with older notes, isn't it? And not just in the UK, by the way.
That's right. We've seen food sharing successfully take place in 59 countries. Wow. And about a third of our sharing is outside of the UK.
Wow. And presumably there's a good community element there as well.
The community is at the micro, hyperlocal level, sort of scattered all around the globe. It's all about individuals in the same street, same neighborhood, coming together to share their spare with each other and look after each other, which has been super important during the last 12 months.
I like it. Share their spare.
Sharing is caring.
I love it. Right. So we need to get on with this. Have you done that, Nick?
I've not joined the programme, but I was just saying, with the lockdown, we have a local WhatsApp, which everyone's doing. Not necessarily, actually food's happening, but all sorts of things are being shared. So I think that mindset is actually becoming more reinforced by the lockdowns, I think.
Well, I think this all connects, actually, Marko. We might come back to this about, business leaders wanting to share with each other, right? So we'll come back to that. Of course, last but by no means least, Josh Wintersgill is joining us. Can you hear me, Josh?
I can, loud and clear.
Good morning, Josh. You are the creator of the Easy Travel Seat, and you're the founder of Able Move yourself. Just tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Easy Travel Seat, Josh. This was designed to solve a challenge that you'd faced very personally.
Yeah, right. So I'm in a powered wheelchair, and flying, particularly for wheelchair people in wheelchairs, is astronomically challenging. And I got kind of fed up after a trip in 2017 and thought we need to put an end to the way in which wheelchair passengers fly. And it's kind of spiraled out of control, whereby I applied for the UK Disabled Entrepreneurs Award a couple of years ago, which is ran by Sostelios, the founder of EasyJet. And following on from the awards, we managed to get some investment from him and join his Easy family of brands. And we've been going now since 2019.
Yeah, and that makes every sense. And I always know if a company's using easy in their title, they're either facing a partnership with Stelios or a big lawsuit. So I'm pleased to hear that it's the first. Where have you got to in the business growth journey, Josh?
So we've now sold into 15 countries. It's still fairly slow because of COVID now. COVID's put a big stop on things for us because, as you can imagine, a lot of our customers are clinically vulnerable. And it's proven a real challenge to kind of continue selling because nobody's planning on traveling at the moment. And so what we've had to do is really take the downtime of COVID to diversify.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all that you're doing. That's Josh Wintersgill. Well, welcome one and all. We're on this theme of mindset, I think, initially. So I want us to be thinking about that as the backdrop. But Josh has reminded us of what a challenging year it's been. So I just want us to reflect briefly on the biggest change, and maybe the lasting change, if you like, that you've had to make to your business to continue its growth going forward. Nick and then Marko, just very briefly, and then we'll unpick it a bit.
Well, actually, we've been doing very well. It's quite unusual situation. We have a lot of designers, and they're quite young, and they all had to move into London to get jobs because that's the centre of design. It's expensive to live in London or to commute into London. Now they're all living at home with their mums looking after them and making them dinner, and and they're working fine. And we actually really haven't seen any real problems moving from in our studio to everyone working remotely. It's actually been pretty
so that's on running of the organisation. I can imagine a client thinking, do you know what? Global pandemic, belts are being tightened. Maybe that investment in brand and marketing will have to wait.
Actually, again, that's not necessarily the case. I think it's business. Most of our clients is business as usual. They're finding. We were just talking before. We work with a paper company. They're selling lots of toilet rolls, but they're not selling any tissues. There's all sorts of different funny kind of because no one's got a cold or flu at the moment. So we're seeing lots of sort of balances going on in businesses, but they're going. We have to be prepared when this ends. Because it's all going to change. There's going to be a big surge, I think, of new things happening. In fact, we've developed new brands based around the pandemic, PPE protection and things like that. Yeah. So there are opportunities. So I would say in certain industries, we work for the travel retail, and they're just everything's kind of.
No, of course, and as Josh knows very well. Marko, what have you seen? I mean, you must sort of get to listen into so many different conversations. What are the biggest changes that have come through?
I think it's a mindset change on leadership agility. I think sort of flat-footed leadership, steady, sequential. People have really realised the need to step up and stay on their toes, and that agility to be able to pivot and react has been tried and tested. Some have succeeded, others have failed and are dusting themselves down, maybe getting to the party slightly later than their competitors. But I think that's the number one, and what consumes a lot of the conversations in the group that I run. As I said, there are 15 CEOs, MDs. It's definitely about that leadership agility and leading change.
And in broad terms, you spent 20 years of your career with Lego.
25.
25 years.
Yeah.
How have the larger corporations fared by contrast? In theory, they've got bigger war chests in many cases. They could, in theory, be more nimble. You might not see it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it depends which category, because we were just talking before coming on stage. The toy industry's seen a huge bounce. Yeah. Kids are at home, parents are frustrated. How do I entertain my kid? So there's been certain categories that have definitely benefited from the situation. That said, deployment of resources, both human and capital, regardless of whether you're in a category which is thriving or perhaps struggling, has been a real challenge. And even those categories that are seeing a positive bounce from the pandemic, if you're not deploying your human capital and your financial capital strategically and swiftly enough, then you're going to get left behind.
Got it. So Josh, you've got an extraordinary scenario where you've got this amazing life-changing product, which all of a sudden, presumably many people aren't buying because they're not planning to go traveling. How do you get through that with the business intact? What did you do?
Firstly, Richie Sunak's a lifesaver. I think that's definitely helped, especially for small and medium businesses, and not obviously large, of course. But it's very interesting because I think it's all about resilience, and I think, learning how to adapt to change. And I think COVID has kind of just accelerated the inevitable, really. And what we've done is we've basically looked at our current customer base and looked at some of the feedback that we've had, as well as also looking at other areas of opportunities once kind of COVID, as lockdowns start to ease. Where can we capitalize and upsell on new innovative products? And really our values is all around about exploring new possibilities and promoting day-to-day living in an independent lifestyle. And so we've taken that concept and continued to innovate with new products for people to use when they come out. So we've gone from having one product to using the last year to now launch 6 new products going into April. So we'll now have 7 in total. And although the money hasn't been coming in, the business now is in a much, much better position than what it was going into lockdown. So it depends on your mindset in terms of what you look at growth. Yes, growth can be a financial thing, but it also can be what value are you also providing to your customers going forward that doesn't yet necessarily recognize that financial side of things.
Well, that's fascinating that you say it's in a much better position than before the lockdown. 2 very quick questions for you, Josh. Give us a flavour of what those new products are, the next 6, if you like.
Okay, so we've taken the existing Easy Travel seat and made a cheaper, lighter version for customers because we learned that price was definitely a factor. And there were certain activities that the product, what customers were wanting to use for but couldn't use, for instance, swimming. So we've designed something that's more versatile in that space. Then we've started looking at more straps and support mechanisms for wheelchair people. And we've also looked at a cover for wheelchairs as well. What we find a lot of people when they go swimming, for instance, they get out of the pool and they get into their chair, and their chair then gets wet because towels don't always do the job. And there's nothing worse than having a damp cushion that you've got to sit in for a couple of hours until it's dry. So we're just basically taking all of these ideas from the wheelchair community and saying, look, how can we fix these day-to-day challenges that you have?
Brilliant.
And basically Josh, get a machine.
Josh, and I can see through your lived experience of that and that of the community feeds into that product innovation. On the Rishi as superhero front, just briefly remind us, Piers touched on this in his keynote, what did you benefit from? And frankly, what would have happened if you hadn't had that cash?
I think it was the security of survival, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there would be so many small businesses now, particularly, that would just be out of business. And it's been able to keep staff around, not obviously not working, but around for now. But it's also allowed me in my spare time to look at how we develop and grow as well. So, I mean, for me, I think if it wasn't for the support, our business would probably be gone by now. And this is why I think it's so remarkable to think that we are actually in a much better position now. Whereas if it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be here. So it's kind of just a weird scenario.
And just to be specific, Josh, was this furlough? Was this bounce back loans? What were you benefiting from?
Both. We've taken furlough and we've taken the bounce back loan. But I was very critical of making sure that if we were to take the bounce back loan, this wasn't necessarily to pay for kind of staff and stuff like that. This was to actually go into product development and order and finance for stock to help us grow when we come out of it.
So I've got so many questions about this, but Saasha, in a way, the pandemic, and I hate to put it as crudely, but could benefit a business like OLIO about sharing, about neighborliness. We're facing up this huge environmental crisis. To what extent were you forced to do new things, or was it just an excuse to put up to the front of the queue what you'd been hoping to do anyway?
It has been fantastic, if I'm honest, and I don't feel too badly about saying that, even though I completely acknowledge it's been very difficult. But I think we've played a really important role in strengthening communities. We saw more sharing in the first 5 months of the pandemic than we had seen in the first 5 years of OLIO. So it was an absolute explosion. We are not quite 10x the level of activity that we were pre-pandemic.
And what, just to be clear, what in your view was driving that? Because it's quite a mix of things.
I think we've had lots of people who've thought food sharing and household sharing is something they want to try at some point, but they've just kept procrastinating. And then people all of a sudden are at home, acutely aware of their own surplus and perhaps the needs of the members of their immediate community. And it's just such the obvious time to try something and to help. It's a very tangible way to help and to give back.
Sort of spirit of generosity.
Absolutely. It was a real outbreak of altruism, not just COVID. We also have leaned into some new opportunities that we wouldn't have ever predicted. So we saw our members at home baking and crafting and starting all these side hustles. And in July, we decided that we were going to launch a new section in the app called Made, where people can sell homemade food or sustainable handmade crafts to each other. And we launched that in October.
Wow.
So that was the fastest product development cycle we've ever experienced. And right now, at any given time, a quarter of all the listings on the app are in that section. And I think, to Marcus's point, and we had to really, really adapt and pivot and lean into an opportunity. Even though the core business was going strong, there were still other opportunities which were really exciting.
I love it. I can imagine specifically for you, Nick, and also for Piers with your Dragon's Den background as well, there could be some conflicting advice for a business. Do we double down on our existing product? Focus is the watchword. Or is it time to diversify, to extend our brand a little bit? Some words of wisdom, having seen it firsthand. Piers and then Nick.
Yeah, so that's obviously one way of growing I was going to touch upon. But the point is, don't forget the mothership, the core business. Too many people, they go off for this exciting tangent, and they may have a business that's the cash engine, and then they suddenly realise that's not going to plan. Because anything new, it doesn't matter what you've done before, it doesn't mean there's going to be success in the future. So always remember to look after that core business, because you may find that when you come back to it, it's no longer there, then you've got a serious problem.
Interesting. So if I just push back gently on that, presumably there could be situations where you end up jettisoning your core or launch product, or in practice that rarely happens.
I've done that. So we had a business where it was doing about £40 million of revenue, and a new one doing about 2. And our board meetings were 90% talking about the 2 and 10% about, so we sold that piece.
So you sold the original one?
We sold the sort of the cash cow, really, and that cash was then invested in the more high growth business.
Because I think this, Piers, you've been very clear on this, but Nick, I think this could be confusing, because it could be the shiny bauble that gets the attention of the board, but it could be a red herring.
Yes, I think that your point about the core is really important. I mean, we do a lot of work with brands who are innovating, and then their core product just starts to look duller and duller and duller.
To them or to the world?
To the world. And probably to them as well, actually, because it's not an exciting new story. I'm not going to get famous for launching this new product, and so you see a hollowing out of brand portfolios. Oh. And actually, a lot of our jobs now are going in to revitalise the core of brands, to give them, because often there's some essential purpose behind those cores that actually is needed in all those innovations for them to be relevant. So we go back round and look at it again.
Interesting. Right, so you are listening to our panel on commercial growth, and I'm particularly keen to come on to mindset now. So please get your questions coming in our hashtag EBL2021. I wonder, let's go quick fire now. Let's shift gear a little bit. How would you describe your own mindset when it comes to business? It's a word that Marko has mentioned already. And we'll keep this super pithy. Piers?
That's a tricky one, actually. Hey, this year has been quite hard, actually. At the beginning, I thought, what's going to happen? I was starting new businesses, and I thought, where's this going? So my mindset had to be, just buckle, get on with it, get your head down, and just crack on. And that's worked very well. It's been a good year.
Interesting. Now, how about you, Nick? How would you describe your mindset?
I'm actually excited. We've done a lot of prep in this previous year, and we've got a lot of ideas going forward. I think change in society is always opportunity. I think if normally it's technology that changes. Think when the iPhone came in, when people start driving cars, it changes what people need, it changes habits. Habits get sort of reformed, and if you get in at the point where habits are getting reformed, there are new business opportunities there. And so it's very exciting.
It's worth now, Marko, I don't want to get into sort of pontificating, but it's worth thinking about that word mindset, because Nick is putting in other emotions there around how he's feeling, which is very, very clear. But why, I guess, does mindset even matter if you're leading a business? What do you see?
Well, as a leader, you're effectively in a goldfish bowl. Everybody's watching you. And whilst I appreciate for many business owners and many people who are running their businesses right now, a lot of what their interaction is through to their employees is virtual, but your tone, your body language, how you're dressed, how you're showing up, I would say it's gone under the microscope even further now. It's exacerbated. They're looking for small signals. Is the business in trouble? Are they in control? Are they optimistic?
Yes.
Should I be worried? So I think being super vigilant as a leader, particularly in the current climate, is really important in terms of how you are showing up.
So on that, Marko, what is your take then? Because you make a very clear point on showing vulnerability, weakness, fear.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So what I'm not saying is wear a mask. What I'm not saying is just bravado will win. On the contrary, people will smell a rat a mile away. It doesn't matter how wonderful you think you are, you will not act your way out of this. So I think it's very important that you are humble, you are honest, and you are having meaningful conversations. But I think it's how you go about doing that which is the really important element.
So I guess we've got two thoughts there now, Saasha. One around mindset and also how you show up as a leader, how you communicate. What's your take on both?
I think I'm echoing a lot of the things that have already been said, but authenticity is incredibly important. And I think during this period, you need more frequent communications with your stakeholders. So we've really gone to more daily or twice weekly with all team meetings, also with your customers and your investors, because you're not meeting people face to face. You just need to increase the frequency to reassure everyone that you're all on the same page and you haven't sort of gone off in different directions.
Can I ask you a question though, Saasha? Because presumably there will be times for any CEO or co-founder when internally and perhaps in the middle of the night, they're thinking, oh my goodness, I really don't know how we survive this. And yet you're forced perhaps to project an image of positivity, resilience, optimism. To you, does that then somehow lack authenticity? I'm just trying to help navigate between those two.
I think you have to do both, but what we like to do is to let the team know after we've come through the other side.
Yes.
So, once a quarter we'll sort of have okay guys, remember back in March when we seemed really calm, underneath the surface we were paddling furiously, and here's what happened and here's how we navigated through it. And we sort of let people see retrospectively that how we struggled and how we got through.
Interesting, really interesting. Josh, what's your take on this around how would you describe your own mindset and also how you communicate? Because it's not just to your team, right? It's to the world.
I mean, it's a really interesting one, I think, but because I come with a disability background, you naturally have to adapt to change all the time. And I was having a conversation the other day with someone around tech and how correlated technology and disability actually is. And it teaches you various different things. And I think for me, the three key kind of areas that I focused on is being forward thinking about what does the future look like? How is that going to impact me? And what do I need to do to be prepared for that? Also resilience. I think you need to be able to take setbacks and understand that setbacks might be coming and be able to take them on the chin and get back up and keep going. And then the other one, Oli, is the one you just touched on, was resilience. I mean, you don't get anywhere in this world without having a stiff upper lip and kind of just knuckling down. And so I think those are my three key areas in terms of having a good positive mindset longer term. In terms of
sorry.
Yes.
Forgive me, carry on.
No, go for it.
Okay,
so in terms of sorry, no, you go, Oli.
How do you encourage that in your team? And I'll ask everyone for this tip, but all very well being a resilient and positive leader, but how about bringing everyone else along with you? Practical.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to support them, right, and have daily conversations with my team. We're only a small team, so fortunately, I'm able to have kind of that one-to-one dialogue with the team. But I think a lot of them see what I go through on a day-to-day basis and kind of maybe use that as their momentum to keep themselves going, as well as sharing the vision and the values that we have here in terms of trying to change other people's lives.
Really helpful. Why don't I get a similar tip from each of you, just around encouraging that growth mindset, if you like, in the team. Nick, Marko?
We're moving from a kind of mindset of directing our staff to mentoring our staff. And it's actually a big change. So what that's saying is, we would normally have people come to us and say, look, I've got these three things I'd like to do. Which one shall I do? And we're now saying, you come to us and say what you'd like to do, and then we'll talk about it, and then you go for it. It's a slight mindset swap, but it puts them in charge.
Yeah.
And then you get things happening from the grassroots all the way up through your business. And it's very exciting.
So that's very interesting, Marko, isn't it, around an evolving style of leadership? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think mine's a very pragmatic tip. Pick up the phone. So I think we've been so used to Zooming and teaming all the time. Just pick up the phone and have a quick chat. Even if you have to leave a WhatsApp voice message, it's personal, it's to them. Just checking in, how are you? You know, how are things? Hope that project's going well. It means so much to people. So don't forget to use the phone. Don't forget to make it personal.
Right, it's good to talk. Now, Saasha, I've got a very specific question, which I'm going to put to you, but it could be for others. Ian Lewis is asking here that we've seen lots of regulations come from the UK government on ethical business. We've now got additional pressure from the government and many others on sustainability, climate and reusability. How should we be changing, if at all? And you're walking the walk, but messages for others.
Well, like specific government policy suggestions?
Well, it seems to be, but I guess it's saying, you know, these guidelines, these targets, net zero and so on are coming out.
Too much is voluntary. Too much is voluntary right now. So we need to have regulatory policy interventions that require sort of reporting in terms of the amount of food waste, the amount of emissions, and not make it voluntary. That's the big difference between getting to where we need to get to with net zero and where we are now.
So on that, you've been talking to some of the world's leading brands. To what extent do you feel that this message is rising up?
Oh, it's at the forefront. I mean, if you think about the pressures, it's not just regulatory. You've got investors are now looking to invest in green business. You've got CEOs who want to be famous, not just for making money, but for changing culture. You've got Paul Polman at Unilever, is famous for doing just that. Yeah. You've got staff who don't want to work for a company, who wants to work for a fracking company. You know? They want to work for a company that does good. I expect you get lots of people writing and saying they want to work for you. So now the pressure, and then consumers are now on the tipping point now where they're going, my decision making is sustainability or ethics is now part of that decision making process. So I think it's very interesting.
And Josh, this must be on your mind. Potential travellers thinking about the mark they make on the planet. What are you hearing?
They're eager to go, right? I mean, everyone's just biting, chomping at the bit to get on and travel. But sadly, again, for my demographic of customers, it's not always just that easy. We have over 60% of our customers have their wheelchairs damaged when they fly, either lost or damaged. And over 63% of them have to dehydrate themselves in order to fly. And so, it's kind of this, you're kind of weighing up two things. You're kind of weighing up this ability to go and live your life and travel, but comes at a cost. So, I think as a community, we just can't wait to get back out and start doing what we want to do.
Yeah, good, and to do that in very responsible ways. I know. Well, I'm going to say I wish that we had longer, but the good news is that Hannah is going to quiz you a little bit more. There's so much I wanted to ask you, particularly about that Lego journey as well, Marko. But just out of interest, Vistage is open to leaders across the UK as well. We can join in.
No, absolutely. No, it's if you're a business owner, or you're an MD, a CEO of an organization, and you're interested in learning from others rather than just from a book or going on a course, then please look us up and explore the options, because there are plenty and often very close to your own area.
Brilliant. And we had a masterclass earlier on how to pick some of those mentors and advisors from peers. So I was very grateful for that. And I know, Saasha, we've talked before about finding your tribe to surround you with as well. But for now, Saasha, to Nick, to Marko, and to Piers, thank you so much for joining me. That was hugely enjoyable. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so commercial growth, good growth, as my panel leave the stage and start to make their way back to see Hannah momentarily. It's really got me thinking, firstly, about some of the challenges that some of these, because like Piccadilly Circus around here, some of the challenges that they faced. Was it really a chance to bring some of their plans forward a step? and to accelerate those, if you like. To what extent are they feeling optimistic? And I think the temperature there was very positive, wasn't it? Very optimistic, but that doesn't mean that's how you feel. So tell us what you're thinking. Our hashtag EBL2021. What questions would you be asking? What are your reflections? But for more, as they go backstage, it's my pleasure to hand to my inimitable co-host, Hannah Previtt.
Well, thank you very much for that, Oli. What a fantastic panel to kickstart the day, and of course that keynote from Pierce also. There were so many good lessons there for our small business audience and entrepreneurs to take note. Plenty from Pierce with lots of practical advice and places to look. I really enjoyed his thoughts about how entrepreneurs need to stay focused, because I think that tendency to kind of veer off course and to get attracted by the shiny things is a real temptation they need to avoid. And I am thrilled that I'm now joined again by Pierce. If you'd like to come and join me up here, Pierce. Sorry, I know this is the this is the third time that you've been grilled by us today, so we won't keep you too long, I promise. But I think what it would be really good to hear from you, lots of people will think you've got it sussed, right? So they see you as being very successful, you're a dragon on Dragon's Den, you have all this brilliant advice for them. But can you give us some examples of throughout your career where it's been really tough and, you know, you've had to really work hard and kind of dig deep to keep going?
I had quite a few of those, actually. I had a company that we had to sell in a fire sale. You got 130 people that are looking at you saying, you know, am I going to have a job tomorrow? So you've got those kind of scenarios. You know, businesses where, you know, you've started them or invested in them, actually, and you're supporting the founders, and for whatever reason that business hasn't worked out. I think they're the difficult moments where you have to, as entrepreneurs, you have to sort of see through, look to the other side, and then keep going. But sometimes it's really hard, and it's tears.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, how do you keep going? You know, after a difficult day in the office, do you have any, you know, kind of practical things do you do? I think you're quite into biking, aren't you? Do you go out for a bike ride?
I didn't get. That's my bike got nicked last week, so I didn't get out enough, to be honest with you, and I haven't got out to the lockdown. So basically, entrepreneurs, you know, they don't stop because it's raining. You know, it's something that it's a passion, it's a vision, something you want to do. And often, you know, that business that didn't work out, that's not a bad thing. You've learned. You know, serial entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs because they've learned along the way how not to do things, and they've learned the skills. A lot of it is you do learn it as you go along. So the point is that venture didn't quite work out. It may be a stepping stone to the next one. Most successful entrepreneurs that I know, it was their third or fourth business.
That's really interesting. And so is resilience a quality that you look for when you're looking at investments?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the stage. So if it's a real startup, you are very much focused on the individual, really, because whatever business they think they're starting is highly likely, you're looking at it through lockdown as well, that they may have to pivot and it may become something else. So really, you're looking at that individual in terms of, can they actually, you know, survive and go the whole course, and will they be able to pivot and deal with the issues? And you're there to support them as well. But it's a tough journey, and not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur, even if they think they are.
I'm sure. And speaking of investments, tell us, Dragon's Den, what was your most successful investment during your time in the den?
So I invested in Lost My Name, which became Wonderbly, which Google invested in that as well. So I think they've printed 6 million books now, delivered 200 countries. You know, it makes tens of millions of revenue. So I think it's probably, I think I was the first to do a proper tech deal in Dragon's Den. People took the mickey out of me a little bit in the green room. That's never going to happen. That's not what Dragon's Den's about. And I think it's probably the most successful business in terms of a company that someone's invested in, hopefully at some point will exit, ever to be on the programme.
Wow, an extraordinary feat. Do you look back on your time on Dragon's Den with fondness?
I do, yeah. It's a bit weird. It's not like another world. It was weird being on that programme, actually. But at the time, I didn't really know I was a reluctant celebrity, I suppose. I didn't really know how to handle it, actually. But I think now, looking back, it's given me a lot, actually. It's opened lots of doors, and people take my phone call, and I get to do, you know, things like this.
Amazing, and we're very lucky to have you. One criticism that often gets levelled at the Dragons from journalists like me, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, is that they can seem to be a bit greedy with the amount of equity they want. What do you say in response to that?
Well, when I did my deal with Lost My Name, I took 5%. So I think that was the first kind of that. They wanted to give me 4%, and I negotiated an extra 1%. So, yeah, you can see some companies where, you know, they might give 30% away. for not a huge amount of money. So you've got to be very careful about it, because that is gold dust. But in some cases, the added value of that program and the PR has launched a lot of businesses, and they've gone on to do very, very well.
In fact, ones that haven't even received investment on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
On the topic of investment, we have some audience questions here for you. So one of our audience members asks, what do you think would be the best investment to take during a pandemic? Surely that depends completely on the type of business.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many businesses that I've got friends in hospitality that are really struggling, and people who are in different technology businesses or delivery. I was talking to a chap the other day who used to make my sort of rotis on the street near Charlotte Street in London, and now he's set up a business delivering food. He's doing 1,000 deliveries a week. He's got a lorry full of these things. So it just depends on what sector we're in, really. It's very difficult to say. An obvious one would have been video conferencing.
Yeah, well, I look at Hopin, right? Hopin.
What a great success story.
I know, incredible.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, amazing business. So there's another one here related to finance. So you said that many businesses don't understand their financing options, and this person says they think that this is because they don't understand their finances in general. So perhaps they don't know how to read a balance sheet, for example. Do you think that
Two
can
different
be
things.
true?
So one is understanding how our accounts work and how a P&L and a balance sheet and a cash flow works and how they interact with each other. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. You need to understand that to go and raise finance. But often entrepreneurs like Dragon's Den, you don't need to understand your numbers. Just go and find someone that does. But understanding your financing option in terms of what kind of finance, where you get it, on what terms, how you prepare for that process, that's a different thing. So I wouldn't confuse the two.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. And this one takes us in a slightly different direction on the subject of exports. So, Brexit has happened. Do you think that that's altered in any way the appetite for, UK exports overseas?
So the business we crowdfunded last year, we manufacture 3D printed mountain bikes, and we export. So there's been a bit of a cold tile moment of how do we understand the paperwork and the process that's changed, and it's slowed things down, but eventually you begin to realise how it works. And my view is that it depends how far you look, doesn't it? If it's 1 year, it's complicated. Look at 10 years. Water finds its level, and they will understand the process, and it will become more efficient. So, just as I said before, entrepreneurs never stop because it's raining. They'll just get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. Just find ways to get through it. Okay, well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Before you go, optimistic, scale of 1 to 10, whereabouts are you at the moment?
I'm an 8, I'd say. I think there's still a few difficulties out there. How long is it going to, it'll be a recession, but it's going to be a difficult period of time. We don't know how long that's going to be, so prepare for that. If it wasn't for that, it'd be a 10, but I'm about an 8 because there's a bit of uncertainty there still.
Okay, I think we'll take an 8. Thank you very much for that, Pierce. I'd like to welcome Saasha now to come and join me in the hot seat, as it were. Saasha, massive fan of what you're doing with OLIO. What an absolutely extraordinary achievement.
Thank
How
you.
are you feeling about things going forward? We hear that you've had, as it were, a good pandemic. So how are you feeling about the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm feeling very optimistic, both for the recovery, for the planet as well, for the health, the climate health of the planet, and also for OLIO. I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that hopefully some of the lessons and behaviors that we've adopted during the crises will continue, and it will be better for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And you as a business, how have you been functioning in terms of day to day? I presume you're fully remote at the moment. Do you expect that to continue?
So we've always been a remote first business, so we were set up to operate like that from the very beginning, so there was little to no adjustment for us. We did double the size of the team from just under 20 to just over 40 over the last 12 months, so we've had to onboard a lot of new team members who I've never even met, so I'm hoping and looking forward to the time that we can get together and meet face to face.
And what implications does that have for culture? So onboarding in a pandemic, when you can't have those team lunches and the other nice things that happen when you join a team?
We have to have virtual team lunches, virtual quizzes, virtual coffees, scavenger hunts, and for the brief periods where we did reopen, we did immediately try to meet up in groups of 6 outside and have fun days out. But the reality is OLIO is a mission-driven business. We're on a mission to eradicate food waste from the world, and we hire for mission first. And since everyone's mission aligned, it's quite easy to keep and maintain the culture.
So how do you do that? So when you're interviewing, you know, because people can say the right things, right? They'll say the things that they want, you know, they think you want to hear. They'll have done their research. So how do you work out the kind of wheat from the chaff, as it were?
It's not as hard as you'd think. We always ask everyone in the final presentation, what about your personal background and experience makes you uniquely right for this role? And those that start that, well, I shouldn't give this away really, but those that start that part of the presentation with a picture of themselves as a child picking up litter, or something that really reflects that this is a lifelong commitment to making the planet healthier and the world a better place, that's where the real sort of passion and authenticity of being mission driven comes out. If someone starts talking about how they might have a keep cut cup and, you know, they don't use plastic bags, like, then they're clearly talking about recently adapted behaviors, and they're not really right for our culture.
So you said you've grown to over 40 people now. That's extraordinary. So when you can go back into the office, will you have a home, a physical home, or will you continue to be fully virtual?
We are a remote business. We always have been. We only get together for offsites and sort of away days by exception. Otherwise, we're 100% remote, and we have people all over Europe, really.
My goodness, that's
makes it great for people who value flexibility. I'm a mom. I still get to, when school's open, do pick up and drop off, and things like that are really important to me.
And is that something you encourage throughout your team? So
absolutely. So it's a very flexible working environment, and people are all of our team members are encouraged to prioritize that part of their family life or well-being. That helps keep them sane, because then when they come back to work, whether it's, you know, in the middle of the night or whenever it is they prefer to work, I don't mean the middle of the night, but you know what I'm saying, then they're fully committed and re-energized.
Absolutely, and as the mother of 2 young children, I completely I hear you. So I asked Pierce then about some tricky moments and how you bounce back from those. I think it's really good as a journalist. Obviously, I always love the anecdotes, and it's something our readers always really enjoy, is hearing those kind of first-person war stories, as it were, and how people bounce back from those. So, you know, do you have any of those?
Yes, of course, absolutely, and especially sort of in the beginning. OLIO is my second business, so I've been an entrepreneur now for going on a decade. And in the beginning, every time you did something new, you thought it was a silver bullet that was going to sort of magically accelerate you on this path towards exponential growth. And then, of course, the reality is something that's much less exciting and often falls flat on its face. And it's you do go on that emotional journey. So we launched all different types of sort of monetization strategies into the app in the beginning, raising money for charity, allowing people to sell things, and that none of them worked. And after the 5th, 6th, 7th, you know, after the 10th time it happens, actually, you sort of expect it not to work. You've already sort of grieved, and you're already thinking about what's next in terms of your strategy, the next thing that you're going to try. And I think resilience is almost the same thing as having an experiential or not experimental mindset, and expecting that it's just as valuable to learn that something doesn't work quickly as it is to learn that something works. And you need to encourage your team to celebrate both the fast fails and the successes.
And I think this is something we've adapted very much from our kind of American cousins, isn't it? We were always really bad in the UK at talking about failure and learning from failure, in a way that they seem to be much more accepting of that as a culture, right?
Well, I am American. I've been here for 16 years, and yeah, I do think in general Americans are better at talking about their feelings than here in the UK.
And, you know, the opposite of failure.
But that's not always a good thing. So
I guess there's a flip side,
yes.
Right? So, and the opposite of failure is obviously incredible, astonishing growth that you've had since the pandemic.
Yes.
I always find it really interesting that there is a flip side to, you know, that fast growth. It can be really hard to keep up with things like cash flow, as you were saying, about onboarding new team members at that kind of pace.
Yeah.
So do you think there can ever be a downside of growth? Can you grow too fast?
I'm sure if it compromises the quality of the experience that your customers are experiencing. So for us growing quickly, we were drawing in new members to our community who might not understand our community guidelines, and we had to work really, really hard to reassure the community as it grew that trust and safety and all of the things that make OLIO special, that we could continue to maintain that. So there are definitely watch outs as you're growing really quickly, but that's, you can't have it all, and it's a nice problem to have.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. So Saasha, thank you very, very much indeed for your contributions this morning. Thank you.
Bye.
So, and we're now going to have, last but not least, Nick, if you would like to come and join me.
Hi.
Hello. Could we hear a little bit more about Echo? Can you tell us about maybe one of your favorite? Again, we're not allowed to have favourites, are we? But one of your favourite projects that you've worked on for a brand, perhaps during the course of a pandemic.
Well, if I might go a bit before then, we actually work with, we do a lot of future visioning work. We help companies think about what their future is. And it's interesting that during the pandemic, it actually gives us a chance to think about the future a bit more, doesn't it, with those quiet times. But actually, we work with a distillery company. And if you think distillery companies are all about distilling, they make whiskies and vodkas and so on like that. And when we went to work with them and talked about the future, we had all things about the problems with alcohol, the social issues around alcohol, shipping glass around the world, in whiskey and things like that is not good from a CO2 point of view. They had all sorts of problems in their minds around this. But actually, when we started to sort of think about the future, we sort of shifted their purpose from being around making booze to managing societal sort of inclusion and fun and bringing people together. And they actually, when you start to think about your purpose in that way, then all the other stuff gets sorted out. And that's kind of a positive vision, that purpose, I think, is really exciting when you get to work on projects like that.
Mm-hmm. And is it also fun? I can imagine the process of getting to that point is really good fun.
Oh yeah, it's great fun, because what we did, we had over 70 marketeers all in one room. And we put together 3 movies about the future. We took them 25 years out. Now you can imagine that's a long way out, but if you're making whiskey, you put it down for 12, 15 years. So you kind of need to look a long way out. So we took people out and we showed them videos of 3 different people in the future, and what their lives might be like, the sort of way they might live, the sort of buildings they would live in and work in, how they would be using technology, how they interact with each other. It's very exciting stuff. It really inspired everyone to start to sort of think out of today's issues and problems and to explore and create a vision.
Absolutely. Gosh, what an interesting project. One of the questions that I've asked our other speakers so far is about kind of tricky moments. What is it that can keep you awake at night?
I think our business is totally reliant on people coming to us and wanting consultancy, if you like, or designs. So we can't predict the future. We never know what we're doing more than 2 months out, which is very scary. So it's for us, that's the tricky moment, is like when the funnel isn't full and you're going, where's the next lot coming from? And so that's why we're doing a lot of work in forecasting, to sort of break that down and start to make sense of it rather than just seeing a big empty hole in the future. And when you look backwards, we always managed. But when you look forwards, there's nothing there. Our accountant just cannot understand our business at all. He just says it's wrong, it shouldn't exist.
I'm sure it's very similar to being a freelance journalist.
I'm sure it is.
We do have a question about business plans, and I'm interested to know if indeed you have one, because you say it's so hard to forecast. Somebody's asked for your advice on what should be considered a good business plan. Do you have any views on that, or is it not really something you do much of?
No, absolutely. I think it's essential. I think for my issue, when I started a business, I wrote a very detailed business plan about, how many people we'd have, how much their salaries would be, what's our income and outgoings going to be, what sort of building do we need, and all this sort of thing. It all went out the window almost as soon as we started. It was useful, but it was too factual, it was too detailed. I think a business plan should be more about purpose. It's more about where do we want to be, where's our vision, and then starting to build steps towards that. So you say, we'd like to be here, you get everybody on board with that, with that shared vision, and then you start to look at the steps to take you there. And that's flexible, because then you can start taking into account what we call causal forces, things that are coming in left field, new technologies or pandemics, and you can plan for that. It's called scenario development. It was developed by Shell, back in the 50s or something, and it's a very useful way of thinking about the future. Don't have one plan, have multiple plans.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and having that kind of real core mission statement being, fundamental to everything you do.
That ties everything together.
Yeah, exactly, and aligning everyone on the journey. I love that. Thank you so much for that, Nick. That was a perfect note to end on.